Welcome to Replatform TV, the YouTube channel for the popular Replatform podcast, available on all popular platforms including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Hosted by myself, Paul Rogers, and fellow experienced e-commerce consultant James Gurd, we'll provide regular deep dives into important e-commerce topics with practical advice for getting results and improving your site performance.
And welcome back to Replatform TV. In episode 2, we are looking at ways to use overlay and exit intent tools. Now, exit intent specifically has been much maligned over the years. I know some people I know well who say it's a pointless thing and it doesn't work, but I disagree wholeheartedly. We're going to talk about practical tips and advice, 10 things that you should think about, because as with anything, execution determines whether or not is it successful. Now, a few facts and trends. Some of the research I've seen, up to 10 to 15% of lost visitors can be saved by using exit intent pop-ups. That does hold true in some of the campaigns I've worked on. The average e-commerce conversion rate is 2 to 3%, which means up to 98% of the sessions exit without an conversion. Now, there are natural reasons why some people leave a site. Not everyone's ready to buy, not everyone's visiting to make a purchase. So you have to take that in context. But there, on every site, there are sessions that leave because of an issue that the customer has found, either something that's been a barrier to the purchase or a UX issue that has stopped them from making a purchase. And this is where pop-ups and exit intent can help. But our caution is you've got to be careful, because doing it poorly can adversely impact the brand. And there are lots of tools in the marketplace now that provide overlay and exit intent capabilities. Yieldify, Just Privy, Bounce Exchange, just a few. Many of them have standardized apps that integrate platforms like Shopify, and there are specialist providers like SmarterClick who provide their own technology and managed services as well. So it's a pretty mature part of the market from an e-commerce point of view. But using it poorly can lead on to frustrations, can't they, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the ones that I've got written down here. So the first one is conflict. So I guess different levels of pop-ups conflicting upon your first load, which happens a lot and is very annoying. Intrusive pop-ups, which you see a lot, particularly for, lower priced items and brands. So just kind of pop-ups really impacting the user journey. Being oversold, and then irrelevant kind of call to actions that you don't really need to see.
Definitely. So with that in mind, we're going to focus on 10 top tips today. I had trouble saying that. So my first one is surveying visitors using overlays to get survey data, qual and quant. Underused, most pop-ups are basically sales message or sign up, but tactically use a pop-up when people haven't completed specific goals. And now that could be something like they visited a category page but they haven't clicked through into a product. Use the survey to inform site content and merchandising plans. Ask people, why were you here, what was wrong, or did anything stop you buying today? Learn from your customers. A good example, Bonia, I think I'm saying it correctly, is a top Asian fashion retailer. They're about 200 million plus. They use the survey pop-up to find out why people weren't buying products. They use the info to inform A/B tests on navigation and content, and they started to change the navigation in order to tackle some of the issues people had in finding products, and they got a 28% increase in conversions on the sessions they measured using that overlay style. So that's my first one, surveying.
Great. So my first one is data capture pop-ups, and a few tips around that. So as I mentioned before with conflicts, it's really important to ensure that your kind of initial data capture pop-up doesn't conflict with things like a GeoIP fallback overlay, which is really important to make sure the user's on the correct store and can actually ship to where they're looking to ship, for example. And then also the cookie banner as well, or any kind of welcome pop-ups you have for international users. You need to you should avoid showing the pop-up to someone as soon as they land, ideally, but this I think is worth testing. So I've seen mixed results. It's also worth kind of split testing different messaging. So I've seen people really benefit from this. So for example, both offer users who sign up to their newsletter free shipping versus just a standard 10 or 5 or 15% off. And then some people now seem to do monetary value as well. So $50 off your first purchase, for example, for kind of premium brands. And I think that's worth testing. And I've definitely seen people benefit from that. Test different trigger approaches as well and kind of time in for data capture. So it could be that you show it on a specific page or a specific time. And again, it's worth testing because customer data is obviously hugely important, and kind of opted in users is increasingly important for e-commerce businesses. So it's well worth applying some time to testing different messaging and approaches. Ensure you're only showing a pop-up once and you're only targeting new users and people that aren't already in your list or haven't already purchased. And then one potential thing you could do that I saw a client do recently is, if you do find that actually the pop-up performs best earlier in the journey, and you're serving a welcome pop-up, you could combine. So for example, for some of their international users, they would talk about things like taxes and duties, shipping and returns, and then they've also got the data capture proposition within that same pop-up to avoid then having too many pop-ups so quickly within the journey.
Nice. About my favourite example of how not to do this, retail e-commerce, I won't shame them. I unsubscribed from the newsletter, and then on that unsubscribe page, an overlay popped up asking me to subscribe to the newsletter, which was absolutely bonkers. That shows, we'll talk about targeting later on, but the criticality of doing this right. Yeah. My next one is targeting guest basket abandoners with exit intent campaigns. So these are people who've come to the site, they're not logged in, you don't know who they are, you don't have an email address for them, for example, so you can't do your standard like exit intent email campaigns. Use an overlay to encourage them to maintain that basket journey. So we talked about abandonment rates. Baymard has a really good list of average abandonment rates. The average documented online shopping cart abandonment rate, according to their aggregated list, is 69.8%. So a lot of people create a basket and leave. Some of them leave because they're not ready to buy, but you want to keep them active and warm with their basket so they don't forget it. And others leave because there's something that's gone wrong on the site and you haven't convinced them. Good example of test I ran when I helped basically launch Sage's international exit intent remarketing program is we want to target guest users and we wanted to get them into the email programs because the email conversion rate was really good for basket abandonment. But obviously you don't have an email address. How do you do it? Exit intent overlay. We've saved your basket. Add your email address, we'll send it to your inbox for easy reference. So nice service-based one. And the great thing is that opt-in, it's an email opt-in, so it's GDPR compliant. We can then move them into our service-based standard basket abandonment email campaigns and drive conversion off the back of that. So think about target guest basket abandoners specifically.
Great. And then for repeat basket abandonment, I've got a few tips. So the first one is kind of test different messaging. So for different levels, creating different messaging, pushing things like free delivery and returns, potentially some level of scarcity messaging as well. And something that I saw that worked quite well for a luxury brand that I was looking at recently was appointment booking. And I know appointments can increase AOV significantly, or there's a lot of data to suggest that. And a few of our clients have definitely benefited from those kind of video appointments or face-to-face appointments. Test customer service prompts as well. So live chat can perform really well. Or as I mentioned, the book appointment could be factored into that. So Harvey Nichols is a good example of essentially you don't just continue to get lots of different pop-ups. Instead, they make their live chat more prominent, which is using Hero, which allows you to do that. And then also my last one is just with these repeat basket abandoners, as they are kind of entering details or reacting to pop-ups, make sure that you're kind of recording that and making sure that any new users are going into the right lists within your ESP or CRM.
Yeah, I like the one about creating the specific messaging. I had some success with that around complex software products, about tackling barriers to purchase with very specific value, like USP messaging, which worked well. It links into my next one, which is testing images and copy. So we talk about this on it. Pretty much everything is going to be about A/B testing because you can't get the optimal results without learning from it. So looking at the test I ran with Sage, and we did extensive A/B testing. Every single campaign was constantly A/B tested. So we looked at images, so product versus people. We found that on stationary products, the product images worked better than pictures of people. People sold software products far better, more complex. People relate to other businesses who are using the product. So there's even variances between different products and the type of imagery that resonates. Mix of people as well. If you're using people to sell it, whether it's customers as testimonials or whether it's people to represent what the business and the product is, do the people reflect the target audience? Do you have the right ethnicity? Do you have the right mix of men, women, etc.? Subtle differences in the people you include in the picture people can have a pronounced impact on campaign responses. Then copy length and style. Is it short snippets? Do you have a headline and a sub? Do you have a paragraph of copy? Does longer copy help sell more complex products? CTAs, 1 CTA, 2 CTAs, CTA labels. All of this is up and right for testing. You've got to ensure copy has a clear purpose and resonates with the audience. There's a really good example of sort of Melly Mellow retailer. They were targeting product page viewers bore with an overlay to reassure them on returns. So again, tackling a barrier to conversion. Really nice, friendly thing about free returns, ease of delivery. Got the wrong item, not a problem. Trying to take away that kind of pain of buying something you might then regret. They ran an A/B test and it found that overlay had a 67% increase in cart additions just by tackling that potential barrier to purchase.
Great. And then kind of loosely related, the layout, and actually it crossed over a little bit. But yeah, again, kind of on that theme of testing, test different formats and positioning. So things like notification bar versus standard overlay. Positioning on mobile is particularly important, and it's worth kind of factoring in all the stuff that kind of Google recommends from an SEO perspective as well around pop-ups. So that's important to test. One thing that I had a client find recently, so they're a fashion brand, pretty obsessed with data capture, as a lot of fashion brands are. And they found that a really clean, kind of flat, kind of bold data capture pop-up that was just color and text performed a lot better than lifestyle imagery, which was quite interesting. And things like that are well worth testing. Also, the benefits are worth testing as well, and kind of how you're positioning that and where that's being positioned and how prominent it is versus other messaging, etc. Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah, that's a good point. In the test I did for Sage, interesting, we found different layouts worked in different countries. So a round one worked really well in the UK, a slide out panel to the right worked in the US, and a standard landscape overlay in the middle of the page worked best in France. So regional variations are critical to tease out. My next point, persuasion tactics. I bang on about this a lot in all walks of e-commerce, but persuasion it's not about just trying to force people into decisions they don't want to make. It's about using known persuasion tactics, using Robert Cialdini's kind of framework. I think there's 7 different persuasion tactics. It's good to work through them and look at how you can embed that into overlays. A couple of examples: reviews and testimonials for social proof, reinforcing what you're saying about your product or brand with other people. Authority, found especially for things like electrical brands, things like Which reviews are a really good endorsement. Nice logo, snippet review, somebody else has validated this product quality. And then fear of missing out. I ran a test on a deal for a retailer where the deal was expiring in X days. And we tested different formats and found a countdown timer within the overlay had a far better conversion rate than just static text talking about the date.
Right. And then sequential campaigns. So I think particularly for higher value considered purchases, or like almost like lead gen orientated brand, I think this is really important. So if multiple visits are normal pre-purchasing, or you have kind of lead times for purchasing, it's important to really think about when you're showing different messages along the way, and not to just kind of try to convert someone on their first visit. You need to think about how users progress into different levels of the funnel. Address potential barriers. So James mentioned the one with returns earlier, but you could also suggest an appointment, or it could be shipping related or shipping timing related pre-Christmas, for example. You could test promoting kind of different features of the product if you know that there's a certain product affinity, for example, at different stages. So again, it's kind of that testing piece. And one of the key call to actions could be saving cart, as well as that appointment one as well. And then lastly, so this isn't necessarily related to this, but I've added it because it's a really important one for data capture or any call to action around a discount. One thing that I've seen time and time again is that showing the discount upon data entry performs a lot better than sending the user to their inbox and then sending them the code, for example, if it's code based.
Nice point. Cool. My final tip for people is helping people make decisions by giving filter options within overlays when you've got complex product sets. So a good example, a large product set can lead to choice paralysis. If you've got thousands of products, how does somebody who doesn't know exactly what they want refine it down sensibly? And that's exacerbated if the site has generally poor navigation or an average search functionality with issues in people finding what they want. So give you an example to put context to this. So Watch Shop were targeting users based on specific behaviours. So people viewing specific brands and number of product reviews where they weren't getting to a product decision and conversion. They created an overlay with a simplified message, which was looking for a watch in a certain price range with popular price filters as basically their CTA, so under 500, under 1,000, helping people understanding that they knew from the customer insights that price was a key driver in watch selection for those brands. They helped speed up that decision process in that overlay. They found by A/B testing that against customers who weren't shown that overlay had a 6% conversion rate increase.
That's a really nice one. I do remember I was speaking to someone in e-commerce a while back, and they'd done something where they'd like personalized the data capture pop-ups really nicely based on football club affinities. And they saw a really nice uplift. So stuff like that, I think, really makes sense, particularly if you're doing a lot of volume. And then my last one, so is around kind of those tests that we've both talked about all the way through, and kind of making sure you're tracking carefully. So I think this is where often it really justifies one of those third parties that James mentioned earlier, like a Privy, like a Bounce Exchange, because they give you a lot more targeting capabilities, but they also give you a lot more reporting. So it's really important to kind of validate the uplift that these different approaches are having, and kind of the results, and making sure that you're also, I guess, testing in isolation. So I've had a couple of clients that have ended up down a bit of a rabbit hole, and they've kind of gone too extreme with pop-ups, in my opinion. And although the numbers look great, they're not really comparing it. They're kind of comparing lots of different pop-ups versus not really looking at different approaches. So that's something to try and avoid. And then use event tracking as well in Google Analytics to just, I guess, make sure that you're monitoring what people are doing, where the pop-up's showing, things like that. Just try and give yourself that little bit more data. And then also it gives you parity around how you're tracking conversions in other areas. And then that's it.
Yeah, nice point. For me, the holdout test bit is critical. I remember on Sage, we saw some early numbers and thought, wow, this conversion increase looks ridiculously good and almost too good to be true. And then because they wanted to launch quick and get it up and running and then pare it back. And then we ran proper holdout tests to validate. And we found that there were a couple of examples where actually it wasn't, we were paying money for sales, which we would have got anyway. And it wasn't any incremental impact at all. And we had to turn it off and go, no, focus on where it's adding value. So important. Okay, so we've given 10 top tips. What's your key takeaway, Paul?
Yeah, so I guess we've said it all the way along, but data capture is really important for e-commerce businesses, particularly we've considered purchases and premium products. So just make sure you're testing different kind of variants, different, like using different variables, different pop-ups for different countries, different devices, all of that kind of stuff. And I think, it usually is well worth the time you put into it.
Yeah, agreed. My one is linked to that point about holdout tests is use overlays and exit intent judiciously. They're not fixes for poor user experience. They're meant to enhance user experience, not address issues elsewhere. So make sure tracking is set up correctly and validated by an analytics specialist. It pays to put the time and effort and money into getting the analysis done right so you can validate true impact rather than just reporting out of a tool that says, yes, we've generated £50,000 worth of sales, but you have no idea whether or not that might have actually reduced your conversion rate. You can report sales, that's easy, but knowing whether it's had an incremental impact is critical. So get an analytics specialist on the case and stay on top of the data. Cool, so those are our takeaways. Recommended reading, there's a few from me. Venture Harbour on their site have a blog on Do Exit Intent Pop-Ups Really Work? That was published recently. Conversion Fanatics have a good blog on how to use exit intent, and then to create some balance, because you've got to have a balance view on this, is Yieldify, who are one of the tool providers, provided an interesting blog on the 7 dangers of e-commerce overlays, pointing out where people often get it wrong. So get a balance view, go out and read about this before making a decision. And thanks for tuning in as always.
For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gurd, or my co-host Paul Rogers via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.